People who take advantage of others don't always do it in obvious ways. It's not just about someone asking for money or favors all the time. It's much deeper than that. Manipulation is often subtle, disguised as friendship, love, or loyalty. It plays on your emotions, making you feel guilty for saying no or selfish for putting yourself first. These people know exactly how to push your buttons. They guilt trip you, remind you of everything they've done for you, and make you feel like you owe them. They play the victim, act helpless, or even flatter you just to get what they want. And because you care, because you're a good person, you keep giving. The first step in breaking free is to recognize when this is happening. Start paying attention to patterns. Are you always the one making sacrifices? Do certain people only reach out when they need something? Do they disappear when you need help? Think about how you feel after interacting with them. Are you drained, frustrated, or even resentful? That's not how healthy relationships should feel. Real connections leave you energized, appreciated, and valued. When someone truly respects you, they don't take advantage of your kindness. One of the biggest red flags is when someone makes you feel guilty for putting yourself first. They act like your needs don't matter or like you're selfish for setting boundaries. They expect you to drop everything for them, but wouldn't do the same for you. You find yourself explaining, justifying, and even apologizing for things you shouldn't have to. And the more you give in, the worse it gets. Every time you cave, you reinforce the idea that your needs are secondary, that their wants come first, and that you exist to accommodate them. Another sign is when someone tries to control your emotions. They might gaslight you, make you question your own reality. They'll say things like, "You're overreacting, I never said that," or "You're too sensitive" when you call them out. They twist situations to make you doubt yourself so that you feel like you're the problem. The more confused and uncertain you become, the easier you are to manipulate, and once they get inside your head, it becomes even harder to break free. Pay attention to how often someone actually listens to you. Do they genuinely care about your feelings, or do they only pretend to when it benefits them? When you share something important, do they dismiss it, change the subject, or make it about themselves? Users aren't interested in you, they're interested in what you can do for them. If a relationship feels one-sided, that's because it is. Some manipulators play the long game. They make small, calculated moves that don't seem like a big deal at first. Maybe they ask for small favors, just little things here and there, nothing major. But over time, those small things add up. Before you know it, they've trained you to prioritize them over yourself. It's like a slow erosion of your boundaries. And once they see that you're willing to sacrifice for them, they'll keep pushing for more. One of the hardest things to accept is that not everyone has the same heart as you. Just because you would never take advantage of someone doesn't mean others won't. You assume people will treat you how you treat them, but that's not how it works. Some people will take as much as you let them. That's why awareness is so important. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. The moment you start recognizing these patterns, you gain power. You start seeing people for who they really are, not who you wish they were. And that awareness alone shifts everything. Boundaries are not about being rude or selfish. They are about self-respect. Too often people hesitate to set boundaries because they fear disappointing others or being perceived as difficult. But the reality is, when you don't set clear boundaries, you give people permission to take advantage of you. You teach them that your time, energy, and emotions are always available, no matter how inconvenient or draining it is for you. The more you allow this, the more it continues until you find yourself exhausted, resentful, and stuck in relationships where you feel unappreciated. The first step in setting boundaries is understanding that it is not your job to make everyone happy. If someone gets upset because you said no, that is their problem, not yours. People who truly respect and care about you will not be angry that you are prioritizing yourself. The ones who get mad, guilt trip you, or try to manipulate you into changing your mind are the ones who are benefiting from your lack of boundaries in the first place. They relied on your inability to say no, and when you finally do, they resist because it threatens their control. One of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking they need to explain or justify their boundaries. You don't owe anyone a long explanation for why you can't do something. A simple "I can't" or "that doesn't work for me" is enough. The more you explain, the more room you leave for someone to argue, convince, or pressure you into changing your mind. You don't need to seek approval for your choices. Your time and energy belong to you, and you have the right to decide where they go. Many people struggle with setting boundaries because they feel guilty. They've been conditioned to believe that being a good friend, family member, or partner means always being available, always saying yes, and always putting others first. But there is a difference between being kind and being a doormat. You can be supportive without sacrificing yourself. True kindness does not mean allowing people to use you. It means treating yourself with the same level of care and respect that you give to others. Boundaries are not just about saying no, they are about creating a standard for how you allow yourself to be treated. If you constantly accept last-minute demands, people will keep making them. If you always say yes to unreasonable requests, they will keep coming. If you allow disrespect, it will continue. People will treat you the way you allow them to. If you don't set the standard, they will set it for you, and it will always be in their favor. Enforcing boundaries is just as important as setting them. It is not enough to say what you will and won't tolerate. You have to follow through. If someone repeatedly crosses the line, there have to be consequences, whether that means limiting your interactions with them, cutting off certain favors, or even walking away from toxic relationships. You have to be willing to stand firm. People learn how to treat you based on what you tolerate. If you let them push past your limits, they will keep doing it. The discomfort that comes with setting boundaries is temporary, but the exhaustion of constantly being used is permanent if you don't make a change. The more you practice, the easier it becomes. At first, people might react negatively because they are used to the old version of you, the one who always said yes, who never pushed back, who always made sacrifices. But as you continue to reinforce your boundaries, something shifts. You start attracting people who respect you instead of those who only take from you. You start feeling lighter, freer, more in control of your life. It's not about shutting people out. It's about making space for the right people to come in. Many people fall into the trap of constantly seeking validation from others, often without even realizing it. It starts subtly, wanting approval from friends, family, colleagues, or even strangers. You second-guess your decisions, wondering if they align with what others expect from you. You hesitate to speak up because you're afraid of judgment. You overextend yourself, hoping that if you do enough, if you give enough, if you prove yourself enough, then people will see your worth. But the truth is, the more you chase validation from others, the more power you give away. You become dependent on external approval to feel good about yourself, and that is a dangerous place to be. When you rely on validation from others, you allow them to control your emotions. If someone praises you, you feel good. If someone criticizes you, you feel worthless. You become stuck in a cycle where your self-worth is dictated by how others perceive you. And the problem with this is that people's opinions are inconsistent, unpredictable, and often based on their own insecurities, biases, or limited understanding of who you truly are. You cannot build unshakable confidence on a foundation that is constantly shifting. The need for validation often stems from a fear of rejection. You want to be accepted, to fit in, to feel like you belong, so you mold yourself into what you think people want you to be. You downplay your needs, your dreams, and even your personality just to avoid disapproval. But the more you shape yourself to fit other people's expectations, the further you drift from your authentic self. You end up living for everyone else except yourself, and no matter how much you give, it never feels like enough. Seeking validation is also a form of self-betrayal. Every time you ignore your own voice to please someone else, you chip away at your own identity. You start doubting your own instincts and second-guessing your choices. You look to others for answers instead of trusting yourself. Over time, this weakens your confidence and creates a dependence on external approval to feel secure, but no one else has to live with the consequences of your choices. You do. No one else has to wake up every day in your life. You do. So why let other people's opinions dictate your path? Breaking free from the need for validation requires a shift in mindset. Instead of looking outward for approval, you have to start looking inward. What do you want? What feels right to you? What kind of life do you want to build? When you stop asking for permission to be yourself, you reclaim your power. You stop worrying about whether people approve of you and start focusing on whether you approve of yourself. It's not about ignoring feedback or refusing to grow. It's about knowing the difference between constructive criticism and people projecting their own fears onto you. Not everyone will understand your journey, and that's okay. Not everyone will support your decisions, and that's okay too. You don't need everyone to agree with you. You don't need to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. The only validation that truly matters is the one you give yourself. People who constantly seek validation often feel exhausted because they are always performing. They say yes when they want to say no. They smile when they want to cry. They shrink themselves to make others comfortable. But the moment you stop looking for validation, you gain something even more valuable: freedom. Freedom to make choices that align with your values, Freedom to live without constantly questioning if you are good enough. Freedom to stand firm in who you are, regardless of whether others approve. That is real confidence, that is real power, and that is what allows you to finally stop living for others and start living for yourself. Taking care of yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Too many people run themselves into the ground trying to be everything for everyone else while completely neglecting their own needs. They put themselves last, thinking that if they just keep giving, eventually they will be appreciated, loved, or valued. But the truth is, when you constantly prioritize others at the expense of yourself, you are teaching them that your needs don't matter. You are setting the expectation that you will always be available, always say yes, and always sacrifice, no matter how much it drains you. Energy is not infinite. When you give too much of yourself without replenishing your own emotional and mental reserves, you start feeling exhausted, unmotivated, and even resentful. You wonder why no one checks on you the way you check on them. You wonder why no one gives as much as you do. The reason is simple. People get used to how you allow them to treat you. If you never draw the line, they assume there isn't one. If you never prioritize yourself, they assume you don't need to be prioritized. It is easy to get caught up in the habit of putting yourself last. You tell yourself that you will rest after you finish helping someone else. You convince yourself that your own happiness can wait. But the problem is, that moment never comes. There is always something else. Someone else, another obligation, another demand. And before you know it, years have passed and you are still running on empty. Still waiting for the right time to finally take care of yourself. One of the biggest reasons people struggle to prioritize themselves is guilt. They feel like they are letting people down if they take time for themselves. They worry that saying no will make them seem uncaring or selfish. But prioritizing yourself does not mean neglecting others. It means making sure that you are not neglecting yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot give your best to others if you are constantly depleted. The people who truly care about you will understand and respect your need to take care of yourself. The ones who make you feel guilty for it are the ones who only valued what they could get from you. Taking care of yourself is about more than just physical rest. It is about protecting your peace, your energy, and your emotional well-being. It means surrounding yourself with people who uplift and respect you instead of those who drain and use you. It means being intentional about what you allow into your life, what conversations you engage in, what situations you tolerate, and what environments you expose yourself to. The more you protect your energy, the more you realize how much of it was being wasted on people and situations that didn't deserve it. Prioritizing yourself also means setting boundaries with your time. Time is one of the most valuable things you have, and once it's gone, you don't get it back. Every time you say yes to something that drains you, you are saying no to something that could have nourished you. Every time you give in to obligations that don't serve you, you are stealing from your own well-being. The key is learning to say no without guilt, without explanation, and without feeling the need to justify why your time matters. Self-care is not just about taking breaks. It is about making sure that the way you live aligns with what you truly want. It is about recognizing when you are stretching yourself too thin and having the courage to pull back. It is about understanding that you are not responsible for fixing everyone else at the cost of breaking yourself. The moment you start prioritizing yourself, everything shifts. The people who only wanted to take from you will fall away. The resentment you felt from overgiving will start to disappear. You will finally begin to experience the peace and fulfillment that comes from knowing you are no longer sacrificing yourself just to keep others comfortable. The people you surround yourself with have a direct impact on your energy, your mindset, and your overall well-being. Whether you realize it or not, the people closest to you influence the way you think, the way you see yourself, and the way you move through life. If you constantly give your time and attention to takers, people who drain you, use you, or only come around when they need something, you will eventually feel exhausted, unappreciated, and empty. But when you surround yourself with givers, people who respect you, uplift you, and pour into you just as much as you pour into them, everything changes. Some people take without even thinking. They assume that because you have always been there, you always will be. They take your kindness for granted, acting as if your support is something they are entitled to, rather than something you choose to give. And if you are not careful, you will find yourself in one-sided relationships where you are always the one making sacrifices, always the one checking in, always the one putting in the effort, while the other person simply takes and takes without ever giving back. The best way to recognize who belongs in your life is to pay attention to how you feel after spending time with them. Do you feel drained or do you feel energized? Do you feel appreciated or do you feel taken advantage of? The people who belong in your life are the ones who don't just take, they give. They support, they make you feel valued. A real friend, a real partner, a real supporter will never make you feel like your worth is tied to what you can do for them. They will be there for you even when they don't need anything in return. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing that time equals loyalty. Just because someone has been in your life for a long time does not mean they deserve to stay. Some people were only meant to be part of your journey for a season, but you keep them around out of habit, out of guilt, or out of fear of being alone. But keeping the wrong people in your life only blocks the right people from entering. You have to make room for the kind of relationships that add to your life rather than drain it. Not everyone will understand or respect your boundaries, and that is exactly why they need to be in place. When you start setting limits, the people who were only there for what they could get from you will start to pull away. They may accuse you of changing, of being selfish, or of not caring, but that is just their way of trying to manipulate you into staying in a dynamic that only benefits them. The people who truly belong in your life will respect your boundaries without question. They will understand that your time and energy are valuable. They will appreciate you not just for what you can give, but for who you are. It takes strength to walk away from relationships that no longer serve you. It takes courage to let go of people who have been a part of your life for years, even when you know they are holding you back. But keeping people around just because you feel obligated to is not loyalty. It is self-sabotage. You deserve to be surrounded by people who genuinely care about you, who celebrate your wins, who support you through struggles, and who bring positive energy into your life rather than draining it. The more you raise your standards, the more you will attract the right kind of people. The more you value yourself, the less tolerance you will have for relationships that leave you feeling empty. You do not need a large circle, you just need the right people. People who give as much as they take. People who see your worth without you having to prove it. People who bring light rather than taking yours away. Your time and energy are two of the most valuable things you have, yet so many people give them away freely to those who do not deserve them. Every time you entertain someone who constantly disrespects you, every time you answer a call from someone who only reaches out when they need something, every time you say yes when you really want to say no, you are giving away pieces of yourself that you will never get back. The truth is, not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone deserves your attention, your kindness, or your effort. The sooner you accept this, the sooner you take back control over your life. People who use others have a pattern. They take, they drain, they manipulate, and they keep coming back because they know they can. They push boundaries, they test limits, and they count on the fact that you are too kind, too forgiving, or too afraid of confrontation to call them out. And the more you allow it, the more they will take advantage of it. These people do not care about what you need, what you feel, or how their actions affect you. They care about what they can get from you. You do not owe anyone unlimited access to you. You do not owe anyone your time simply because they demand it. You are not required to answer every call, respond to every message, or be available every time someone wants something from you. You are allowed to put yourself first. You are allowed to say no without explaining yourself. You are allowed to walk away from people who do not respect you. The people who truly value you will not expect you to constantly sacrifice your well-being just to keep them comfortable. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing that if they just give a little more, if they just try a little harder, then maybe the other person will appreciate them. Maybe they will finally get the respect they deserve. But that is not how it works. Respect is not something you should have to beg for. Appreciation is not something you should have to earn through exhaustion. The right people will respect you without you having to convince them. The wrong people will take everything you have and still act like it is not enough. When you start limiting access to the people who drain you, something powerful happens. You begin to regain your peace. You start to realize how much energy you are wasting on people who never truly cared. You notice that your mind feels clearer, your spirit feels lighter, and your days feel more fulfilling. You start attracting relationships that are built on mutual respect rather than one-sided expectations. You become stronger in your ability to recognize who is worthy of your time and who is only there for their own benefit. It is not your responsibility to carry people who refuse to carry themselves. It is not your job to fix, save, or constantly accommodate those who take you for granted. You do not have to feel guilty for putting yourself first. The people who make you feel bad for doing so are the ones who benefited the most from your lack of boundaries. When you start valuing yourself, when you start setting standards for who has access to you, you will see the truth about who was really there for you and who was just using you for their own convenience. Your time, your energy, and your peace are priceless. The wrong people will drain you without hesitation if you let them. The right people will cherish, respect, and pour into you just as much as you pour into them. The more you guard your energy, the more you will attract the kind of relationships that add to your life rather than take from it. You do not need to be accessible to everyone. You do not need to be everything to everyone. You just need to be intentional about who you allow into your life.